Good morning, folks. We're down here at the shop. It is early. It's probably 8, maybe 8:30. Shop opens at 9. And we have a special treat for you today. First of all, I'm joined by my son, who's home from college, Nolan. But we are going to take a tour of some of the bikes that you don't see here on the showroom floor. These are some of the bikes that are almost like a museum behind the scenes here. So we're going to take you behind the scenes here, take you through the shop. We're going to be joined up by my buddy John Bilyeu, who's the general manager here, and he's going to give us kind of a narrated tour on the history of some of these bikes in here. So come along and hope you enjoy. Let's ride. All right, so folks, before we start the tour, I'm here with John Bilyeu, general manager of Modesto, Harley-Davidson. He was just telling me something crazy. So what were you saying again?
So back in the day, in 1994 to 1998, we used to race 883 Super Twin Series, and we used to travel the country for years. We had Matt Waite as a racer, and we had Gator Waite as a racer, and we did all the Grand National flat tracks. We did all the road racing at all the tracks all over the country. And in 1996, we won the Super Twins Championship in Las Vegas against Ben Bostrom, which Ben Bostrom became a MotoGP rider, and Matt Wade also became a MotoGP rider.
And you said you'd been to every state 10 times.
Before I was 20 years old, I went to damn near every state over 10 times traveling, just
crazy.
through every race.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, take us on the tour.
Excuse me. Nothing to see here.
Yep.
Moving through. All right, let's go.
Hey, can you kill your music for a minute?
Good morning, bud.
Morning.
Good, how are you?
Good, how you doing?
Good. I've talked John into talking to me about these bikes up here. That's where we're invading your space, buddy.
No worries.
So
These are bold ones.
that right there is a mixture of many years from the 50s all the way up to the mid 70s, and that is a 1971 FLH that we have adapted a sidecar to it, and the sidecar is designed to pick up customers' vehicles. So the 1950s, 60s, 70s, all the way up to the 90s, we used to go to customers' houses and pick up their vehicles and bring them in for service. If they were stranded on the side of the road or what have you, we would go by and pick them up. If you notice on the front of we call it the hack because it's the side hack. If you notice on the front of the sidecar, all the signatures and stuff that are on top of that, this vehicle was ran in what is called the vintage cannonball run. And you have to have, in that cannonball run, it goes coast to coast. And to run in the cannonball run, your vehicle has to be over 100 years old to go inside of it. But they brought us along one year for us to be a chase vehicle in the cannonball run. And this thing went coast to coast.
No way.
On the cannonball run and was picking up vintage motorcycles that were breaking down along the way. And that is the signature of everybody that rode on that event.
So one of my favorite movies growing up was Cannonball Run. John,
Yeah.
As you know,
Oh, I love Cannonball Run.
the doctor in the back of the of the ambulance that would mix the drinks.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so John, as a layman, if I'm to look up here at these four, I'm thinking that the one I'm looking at here is the most expensive, but that is not the case.
That is incorrect. So that right there is a 1924 JDV twin. Kind of the couple cool things about it is electric lights on vehicles were started in 1920. So this thing actually runs a battery with actual electric lights in it. And it was a fully restored vehicle from Harley-Davidson itself. So it is every single button, nut and bolt on the vehicle is original to the 1924. One accessory it does have on it, as you can see, is the toolbox on top of the fuel tank. That was the accessory back in the day. because you needed your tools to ride this vehicle even down to your buddy's house. But back in the day, you had to be a pretty good rider to ride these things. You had to continuously, while you're riding, pump your fuel tank for fuel pressure. You had to pump your oil pump, and those are all the little handles on top of the fuel tank that you will see. So as you're riding it, you're actually having to pump these things to keep the vehicle running.
And that's all on the fuel tank?
That is all on the fuel tank. And that's the knobs and stuff you'll see up there is all that. And if you look at the exhaust, it has a little cover on the exhaust. And so when you first fire it up, you have your exhaust closed. And then once you get going, you can slide it with your foot. As you can see the little lever behind the box muffler. That was kind of a new invention in 23 and 24. And you can open that up while you're riding to give it more performance.
It was a turbo.
Yeah, it went from 12 horse to 14 horse.
You felt that kick in your ass, didn't you? All right.
So this right here is our most cherished vehicle that we have. It's in 1942, all original Knucklehead. In 1942 was in the middle of World War II. So Harley was building, mostly all their vehicles were all military use vehicles. So when it came to building civilian motorcycles, they did not build that many of them.
Yeah, they couldn't afford that. All the metal and everything had to go to the war.
Everything had to go to the war. If you notice on the bike, there's no rubber on the floorboards. There's no rubber on the kicker because there was a shortage in the war of rubber. So that's why these bikes don't have a lot of rubber on them. This bike right here is, we got it from the original owner that bought it in 1942. And this bike is a 99.9% original vehicle. Every nut and bolt on the vehicle is original from 1942. It does have a couple of accessories on it, which would be the Flanders handlebars, and which is period correct to 1942. And also it has passing lamps on it, which was an accessory with Harley-Davidson in 1942. So those are the two accessories on the vehicle. We still do have the original handlebars to put on it, but they're uncomfortable and hard to ride, so that's why everybody would change them to Flanders bars back in the day.
Rideability on something like this?
Rideability on this vehicle is 100%. Every time we take it down, we go out and go for a ride on it. It has roughly about 25,000 original miles on the vehicle. But this thing runs like it was brand new. I would feel comfortable hopping on it and riding it to Florida.
And we're talking 100% lead paint here. That's why it looks so good.
That's why all the paint still looks pretty good, because it is back when you had real paint. And the engine has been rebuilt just because it sat for a long time, and we had to rebore the cylinders, re-ring it. Besides that, it's all original. Besides the new tires. We had to put new tires on it because they were shot.
Yeah. It is stunning.
And then that vehicle, we had it appraised a couple years ago, and it appraised for $125,000.
How many, is there any estimate on how many are left?
In that particular color scheme, which is a very iconic color scheme, if you look at a lot of old photos or what people use for t-shirt backs on Harley dealerships across the country, that is the iconic red and black. So in that particular color scheme for 1942, there was less than 300 of those made. And I would say in today's market, there's less than 100 of them still around.
How was it must have just been kept under a cover and kept in a barn? Or?
It was garage kept underneath the cover, sitting on a piece of carpet. And the customer that had it would go in his garage and fire it up at least once a month and take it for a spin. And that's what's kept it in such great condition.
And he was out here on the West Coast somewhere, so it wasn't exposed to salt and all that kind of stuff?
Nope, it's been a California bike from day one. And I believe the customer resided up in the Sacramento area.
And I just love that part of our history, right?
The history on these things are just iconic. It's the iconic Knucklehead. And when Harley came out with a Knucklehead in 1936, it was revolutionary. Before then, they had basically JDs and flatheads and stuff like that. But when they came out with a Knucklehead engine, it outperformed every Harley ever built before. It was able to go over 100 miles an hour in a stock form. And it had
So the average Joe could pick this up and out the dealership door, hit 100 miles an hour on the way home to go see Mama.
Yep. And that was unheard of back in the day. The only things that would go that fast would be race bikes, board trackers, stuff like that. Because back in the day, they would be able to build a bike for board tracking, which board tracking was called Thunderdomes back in the day, which was a very dangerous sport. And they were just wood planked tracks that were about a mile long, and they would exceed speeds over 120, 130 miles an hour.
And then
And this vehicle right here,
this looks like I'm looking at my new Heritage.
well, this right here is, yeah, your Heritage is basically built off of this platform. This is one of the iconic years of Panhead. Panheads first started coming out in 1948. And in 1948, they had the Panhead. And if you can see on top of the engine, it looks like a pan, like a cooking pan. And that's why they called them a Panhead. And the Panhead was, revolutionary once again. It had the dual glide front end. So it had a really smooth ride, which if you look at today's Harley, as like your new bike, the front end almost looks the same.
Yeah.
This
Those
particular,
forks, the front end, the fender.
yeah.
It looks like you can take it off this bike and put it on mine, or vice versa.
Correct. And that's what Harley's been known for, is keeping the heritage of vintage bikes and then putting them into the new style bikes. Obviously, the newer bikes have a lot better internals. They ride a lot better than they did. If you notice, this bike, though, is a rigid, so it has no rear suspension. And in 1948, when they first came out, they were rigid, just like the Knuckleheads were. And they ran the rigid frame all the way to 1954. And in 1954, they came out with rear suspension. So this is one of the last of the rigids. So people really dig the earlier Panheads for the nostalgia of the rigid rear end. If you notice too, it still utilizes the rear kickstand, which is a fold down kickstand in the back, which would be its center stand. And that was designed for changing the rear tire in the vehicle. It had a hinged rear fender, so you could put it up on its center stand, hinge the fender up, and change your rear tire. This particular vehicle is 100% stock from the day it rolled off the assembly line. So this was your basically stock Panhead from 1952. Every single nut and bolt on this vehicle is original to the vehicle. And the reason we know that, because there's markings on all nuts, bolts, and everything to utilize that it is a factory nut and bolt vehicle. This was fully restored by Harley-Davidson too. It was in their museum for a while. They had a couple of them, so they sold this one at auction, and we were able to purchase this thing back in 2019. But also too, the 52 Panhead is very well known. If you ever seen the movie Easy Rider, where they have the Captain America bike and the other bike, those two particular bikes were 1952 Panheads. And so its iconic year is 1952 for a Panhead. And so this bike is a perfect example of what the bike came with stock off the assembly line. There's not a lot of chrome. There's not a lot of fancy stuff, because that's how they were.
Yeah. You get that Harley, I guess it would be the equivalent of Vivid Black nowadays.
Yeah, it'd be equivalent Vivid Black. Back then they just called it black. But
it's got a gloss to it, right?
and also too, this vehicle is in perfectly running condition. The owner of it is Linda Mitchell, which she is the owner here at the
boss.
dealership. So the big boss lady was born in 1952, And so she loves this Panhead because it's as old as she is. She is 73 years old and she still rides it today.
What is her name for this bike?
I don't know if she has a name for this.
Do you have a name? This one is yours, correct?
That is my Knucklehead.
Do you have a name for her?
Well,
I'm putting you on the spot, aren't I?
Yes, you are putting me on the spot. I would say out of every Harley that I own, which I do have a lot of Harleys, this is my favorite one of all of them. This is my crown jewel of my collection.
Is it hard to keep it up there, or do you have to keep it up there to keep you off it from putting a ton of miles?
Well, there's a few reasons why we keep them up there. For one, that way if somebody wants to ride it, we say no. And also, too, is that these are very expensive vehicles, and so we are in Modesto, California, so we try to keep them tucked away so they don't steal them. But no, every time it is down, I do get an itch to go take it around the block. And if you talk about a vehicle to go right around the block and get looks, you will get a lot of looks on this vehicle. Photo of Easy Rider, and those are two 1952 Panheads.
And the bike you restored that's out on the showroom floor
Is a 1952 Panhead.
And remind me again, that's a 52 Panhead.
So if you're going to build a really cool Panhead and you want to have like the Panhead, you build a 52. Am I right, Chad?
Yeah, I'm a shovelhead guy though. I like the 60, like the 64, 65, 66 with the gen.
Yeah.
Gen bottom.
Yeah. Well, like my chopper is a 69 generator shovel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite.
Yeah, that's why I built mine.
You can take any bike, that's what you're taking.
Yeah, that'd be a gen shovel.
That's
what
why.
are those going for
And that's why that's in my collection, because I have my 69 generator shovel.
I've seen motors go for 10 grand.
Just
original. Yeah.
And mine's sitting next door in the restaurant. My 69.
Is it?
Yeah, and so we can take a picture over there and show you what makes that bike iconic.
Yeah, because those bikes, the pink slips fit into the bike. The frames don't have numbers on them. So when you buy a motor, you basically that's the bid. So that's why they go for so much, because you can do whatever you want with them.
You can stick them in whatever you want. You got a pink slip.
Anything. Yeah, pink slips registered.
Really?
And the cool thing about these, which they're on the opposite sides of these.
Is that the only vehicle that's like that?
They started 70s. They started doing the frame bend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why Harley-Davidson Motor Company is called what it's called, because they build engines.
Yeah.
It's a motor company. And that's why the motors were tagged, not the frames. And that's why they always go off motor company, because that's where they were. And back in the day, they would sell crate engines to people, and you could literally, like in the 50s, go to somebody's house, and their engine that's running their well for their farm was a Knucklehead engine.
Really?
Or was a lot of times they'd use a flathead, like a flathead 45 or something like that. But they would sell you just an engine. You can use that engine for multiple purposes, because they were an engine company.
And we were just talking about this last night at my house. Born Free. I see the old Born Free poster back there. Born Free 8. But they just had 6.
Well, you got a Born Free skateboard over there.
I know. I was looking at that too. That's pretty badass.
So the photos inside here is all from Modesto. So that was the Modesto Police Department back in the day. There were some farmers. There's a Modesto Harley trike on the wall over there. What's up? So this right here was from Modesto. This right here is from 35, 36. And those are a couple local guys, but that is the police department back in the day. As you can see, their badges on all their shirts. It was the traffic squad from Modesto, as you can see on top
Is
of
there any
it.
year on there?
I don't believe there's a year on there, but that was in the mid 30s.
Cool.
This is, as you can see here, this is MPD, Modesto PD. This bike right here is in This is in the later 40s, early 50s. But yeah, that was how they used to go and do traffic stops and go to accidents and all that. And the siren on the front
That's
was
the meat wagon back in the day.
that was the meat wagon back in the day. And you can see how he's talking into the mic, and that's how they control crowds or tell people to pull over or what have you.
Oh man, whose suit is this? Was this one of your suits? At some
So
point?
this is Matt Waits. This is what I was
Oh, there it
talking
is,
about.
yeah.
And this is back when we were racing all around the country.
Yeah, sweet.
This is a hill climbs in Carnegie, which is not that far from here. There used to be big hill climbing here in the Central Valley. But this is one of our sponsored racers back in the day, and this is probably in the early 40s. This picture up here.
So I grew up going out to Carnegie on dirt bikes, but
Yeah.
I can never imagine like climbing those hills on a Harley, man.
So this right here is Bob White. He just retired.
He's your mechanic, right?
He's 85 years old, and that's back when he was in his 20s and racing for the dealership way back in the day.
He finally retired?
Yeah, he got cancer.
Oh, did he really? And he was driving in from Old Country every day, right?
Yeah, these are pictures of bikes in front of the old dealership way back in the day. And in my office, I have a picture of Leonard Andres on opening day in March of 1938. So, and that was one of the bikes Bob was racing back in the 50s and 60s right there. That's called a KR, and that was the start of the true race bikes built by Harley-Davidson back in the 50s. And the bike next to it is our Super Tracker bike, and we used to race all over the country on that, and that was a Grand National race bike that we had.
What's that called? It's called a Super Track?
It's called a Super Tracker, and it was a series that they had back in the day that we built that bike specifically for that class.
Once again, are these bikes that you personally raced back in the day?
I did not personally race any of them.
And John, I don't see it in here. I'm looking for the monkey.
Here's the monkey.
Oh, there it is.
And we have the true.
Bad monkey. It's a bad monkey.
This is a bad monkey. You're gonna have to ride that, Nolan. So that is a big bore monkey. Normally they're 125 cc's. This one is 170 cc's, 4-valve head, big throttle body. Everything that you could possibly do to a monkey has been done to this unit. Has all-in suspension front and rear, Yoshimiri exhaust, Galfer brakes, everything in the world you can do. That's Bob White again. And we actually still have that motorcycle, one of those motorcycles here.
Which one? Are they both basically
They're
the
called
same?
Sprints. Those are from the 1960s. And that was back when Harley-Davidson was making they were Italian-made motorcycles by Harley-Davidson, and they were called Sprints. And they used to flat track race those, hill climb those. But Bobby was a big flat tracker, and that was him back in the 60s.
He won a lot of trophies.
Bobby was a very good racer. And then over here, that's Bobby in the black hat. And that's them at a hill climb, repairing a vehicle to go hill climbing out at the hill climbs.
And then before we leave this room, what is
So the center picture right there is the original owners of Modesto Harley-Davidson. You know how they talked about the racer that won in 1955?
Yeah.
That's him on the far right. And then that is his wife, which is the lady that's next to him. the next photo. And then on the very far left, that's Leonard Andres himself, which is originally opened in the dealership. And the guy in the middle is Chet. And Chet was the technician that started with him. And Chet is responsible for building all the race bikes and everything. And that was Bobby White's teacher. He taught Bobby everything he knows about working motors, building motorcycles, building race bikes and all that. He was the godfather of mechanics for Harley-Davidson and used to tune and help factory Harley-Davidson back in the 40s and 50s and 60s building race bikes.
Isn't it crazy how much the lines have stayed the same?
Yeah, that's what true is
Like,
Harley-Davidson.
especially like a model like my Heritage, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then what year is this picture taken?
That picture taken right there by the looks of the motorcycles would be in the mid-50s.
Yeah. So we're after World War II. We're out of the war.
Right.
The baby boom is on. That's
And she was a trophy winner herself. Back in the 50s and 60s, women raced, rode, and did a lot of different things. They had a lot of big women's clubs and stuff like that. And she was really, really into it. She was a great racer, great rider.
cool.
And Chet was such an influence to Bobby. Bobby's oldest son is named Chet.
Really?
Yeah. And of course,
Who gave you the flag?
dude, I have no idea.
Or did you guys buy it, you think? Or you don't know?
No, it was donated to us from a veteran customer of ours that had that flag. I want to say his mother, his grandmother. If you really look at it, it's actually woven and sewn flag.
It looks like crocheted or like
It's knitted, and his grandmother made that for him when he came back from World War II.
Way.
And he donated us to the shop, and so we display it with great honor and great pride.
Man, it's beautiful.